Hello everyone and welcome to another Würth Elektronik eiSos webinar. My name is Markus Eberle and I will moderate this webinar today. We are very pleased that you took the time to participate in our webinar. The topic of today's webinar is Würth Elektronik reveals the questions about optocouplers. Our speaker today is Celio Andreev, who is working as product manager in the field of optoelectronics at Würth Elektronik eiSos. He will hold today's webinar and also answer your questions. Before we start the webinar, I would like to point out one thing. You will be muted during the webinar today. This means that you cannot ask us questions via microphone during the webinar. Nevertheless, you have the opportunity to ask us questions during the webinar at any time via the chat function. You will find the chat function in the webinar control panel. Today's webinar will be about 30 minutes long. The chat questions will then be answered in a question-answer session following the webinar. There are 10 to 15 minutes in addition scheduled for this. If we are unable to answer all your questions within this time, we will answer them via email after the webinar. If you still have any other questions left after the webinar, just email us at eisos-webinar@we-online.com. We will try to answer all questions promptly. At the end of the webinar, you will be asked to participate in a feedback survey. We would be pleased if you take the time to fill out the survey and help us to improve our webinars. You will also receive the link to the presentation as well as to the recording of the webinar only in the next few weeks. And now I will hand over to our speaker, Celio, and I wish you an exciting webinar.
So, hi everybody. Hi Markus, thanks a lot for the introduction. And I also would like to welcome you to today's webinar and the topic about explanation of optocouplers. A bit about myself. My name is Celio Andreev. I'm since 6 years responsible for the development of new products into the optoelectronics department by Würth Elektronik. And today I would like to present you our latest product, optocouplers. What we are going to see today in our talk is a short introduction about the optocouplers, the different types of optocouplers, and some consideration about their design and functions. Then we will just shortly move over some applications or where we can see different optocouplers and continue with the technical introduction of our new optocoupler series 816 with technical parameters and information you need to know in the beginning. Then I would finalize with some words about the Würth Elektronik optocoupler specification and some summary and the question and answer session. So now let me begin. First of all, I want to introduce optocouplers and what are the different optocoupler types. Optocoupler is basically optically coupled semiconductor devices into a housing, and they consist of two different parts. The first part is the LED or the light emitting diode, what you can see here on the left of the picture. The LED in this case is a single DC input, but available options also include an AC output with two LEDs that are connected and then opposite to each other directions. But most interesting in this case, in our case, is the second part or the output of the optocoupler, where we can define the different types. On the output side, we usually have a choice of a different detector. The first and most simple one is the phototransistor, where we have a simple transistor that detects the light signal and gives an transistor current output. The second A bit more complicated part is the Optocoupler Darlington. The Darlington is just two transistors connected to each other for better gain and better amplification, which means that we have a stronger signal and a stronger current transfer ratio. The third type is basically a triac output, which is basically used for AC switches and for analog for current AC currents. Its main application are solid state relays, switches, dimmers, and so on. The last but not least is the high-speed optocoupler. High-speed optocoupler have a more complicated detector part where mainly used for a data transfer and communication. The high-speed optocouplers main application are in this case some computer switches, some communication devices, and in some cases they can also follow some communication standard like the RS-232 or RS-485. This is a general overview of all the different type of optocouplers. In our case, I would like now to focus more on the phototransistor type, which will be further the topic of our talk, as this is the product that we want to introduce in the first place. The basic optocoupler phototransistor, it's not a new part. Basically, optocouplers have been on the market or in the development and electronics since the 60s and 70s, and they're well-known parts. The difference here is that in comparison to the first optocouplers, which some of them used a standard emitter or standard lamp, here we already have a high-end semiconductor LEDs and transistor. And what this means or what this brings is basically all we know about the optocouplers and these stories that they are very unreliable parts that easily break down. Basically, in our high-end products, there is completely different, and these are one of the reliable parts that we have also on the board. A few more words about the phototransistor and what is optocoupler phototransistor and what is also his application. The main part is that optocoupler is something like a transformator. Transformer, it just separates two circuits with a galvanic isolation. As you can see on the schematics, the first circuit is the anode and cathode part of the infrared LED, and the second circuit is the one from the phototransistor included. What's the important is these two parts has no physical connection between them. It means galvanic isolation. So only connection between them is the light signal that comes from the infrared LED and is detected from the detector, from the phototransistor. This means that all signals have no electrical connection, and the physical connection is basically done through the light or the emission and detection. So this leads us also to the important information. What are the main functions of one optocoupler? The optocoupler main function in this case are protection and insulation of different electrical systems. In most cases, the isolation becomes or is needed where we have two circuits with different potentials to protect the low potential circuit from surges and high voltages. The second most important function is also the isolation for personal safety. For example, when we need to work on a system or we have access to one of the circuits. Usually we have access to the low power circuit, which is not dangerous for the human. But in this case, the low power circuit usually commands or controls a high power circuit. And to have this isolation and not to get dangerous for personnel and for workers, usually we can introduce some optocouplers to have only the signal and the control. With this said, I would like now to go on to the further point. What are the basic application or the insight or the application of the parts? The main application areas for optocoupler phototransistors, I think everybody can see around himself, and basically we find them in each charging device or each power supply from our computer or charging device from our smartphone, and etc. What's the need there? Usually in this case, we have a transformator that control the current input from the 220 volt to the 5 volt or 20 volt circuit in our mobile device. In some cases, actually, when the battery is full, we need to give a feedback into the charger. Okay, now everything is working fine. I don't need the power anymore. So we use an optocoupler to send out a back signal to the device and say, okay, please stop charging or you're going to damage my battery. And of course, it's important to know that this is the place where we are working on our computer, and our computer is always with us. So such power supplies and charging device also need to be safer for the humans, so for person that they can work with them. Another application is also smart meters in the house, where we have the high power network that's used for all our devices, for the kitchen, for the lamps, for the TV. And then we have the smart meter that electronically counts out all the input and the output, or what current we're using. In this case, you also need some protection for your device. And this is basically also one application area for optocoupler. Further applications are basically in the signal transfer or interface cards from a computer, where in a computer we have different circuits with different potentials, and all these circuits, they need to communicate with each other, they need to exchange information for the proper working of a device, of the device. In other systems, we need to have also some high power motors or controllers, for example, in our washing machine. And we have also some microcontroller processor that is choosing all the programs and controlling everything automatically. In this case, again, we have two circuits with two different potentials, and the separation if this potential usually works very good with an optocoupler. But what we need to have from an optocoupler, or what we need from an optocoupler to be able to serve and to make all these applications. The main requirements in one optocoupler is that the part needs a stable input and output. We need an accurate and safe signal, so we can basically use it as a signal transfer or as a signal communicator between the two circuits. What's important is also the insulation, because of insulation is important because this would help us to protect the low power circuit or the low potential circuit, or the persons working on the low potential circuit. The insulation and The safety we will go on through is basically given also with the different certificates that I'm going to introduce at a later point. Important are also two other parameters. The current transfer ratio basically is the signal, how strong our signal or our transfer of the signal is. A high CTR is a good signal transfer, so we have a low noise and better signal. And of course, last but not least, it's important that we have a component that lasts for a long time and does not age. In this case, I will show you also some information and at the end, but what I said in the beginning is that the current technology of semiconductor that we use into our optocoupler or the simple components as a light emitting diode and the phototransistor allow us to have a very nice overview and to have a part that is good and have a long lifetime, longer than other components that are used in the same application board. And now, with this short introduction, I would like to go to the next step, which is introduce you the Series 816 of Optocoupler in our new catalog. The Series 816 is a special series with a special size and form. And what we offer in our Series 816 is also the 5 different packages or 5 different mounting types of optocouplers. And of course, additional to them, we offer also 5 different binning times or CTR, current transfer ratio binning for each of the mounting types. This is basically something we have worked very hard, and altogether we have 25 new products to offer to you that you can choose from our portfolio and directly test them. But first of all, what are the difference between the mounting pads or the package? The 816 series is actually the 6.4 by 4.5 millimeter size of the plastic housing. What we can differ here is the different mounting. We have two different type of through-hole technology mounting, the standard and M-type, and three different type of surface mount mounting, the S, SL, and SLM type. The difference between these packages is basically shown on the picture below. This is the distance between the two soldering pads. As you can see, we offer distance between the two soldering pads from 7.6 to 9.2 or 10.16 millimeter. I would come back to this distance at a later point when I introduce you the main parameters used for the certification of different products. What I want now to show you here is the important is that 7.6 to 9.5 millimeter. This is the difference or a standard that we can adapt in our standard THT part. It's important to know that this part comes on a tube and can be machine mounted. But in standard machine mounting, there is a one step between which can be used to widen or to shorten the distance. That's why our standard product need first to go through this machine, which is a standard procedure or standard production process. Another important difference is the S and SL type, which have the same size and pins, but they have a difference in height. The S type has a bit of a size or a bit of a air gap between the PCB and the housing of the optocoupler. In this case, This is used when somebody needs additional epoxy mask, or to put additional material, or to use this as a cooling gap, because optocoupler, as we see later, are dependent also on the operating temperature. But first, let's see what else we can find on our datasheet. This is included in our first in our first page of the datasheet. Remember, each optocoupler in our catalog has its own datasheet, and in there you can find the packaging size and the packaging and the mounting model. You can also find all the different certification names and the different certification numbers that you can find out or search out later in internet, or you can directly download them from our website. In addition, in our datasheet, you can find also the different parameters or the optoelectrical properties of our catalog. Here we have separated this in 3 different parts. One is the input properties, or the properties of the light emitting diode. As you can see, the first table in red, where you have the forward current and the dissipation of the LED, or the allowed parameters, how far or how much I can drive my LED. Then we have the output properties. Output properties are important for the detector circuit. What is my maximum collector emitter voltage? As you can see here, 80 volt. And what is my maximum power that I can drive through my transistor before it breaks down? My maximum collector current, and so on. And of course, we have a third part which describes the part by itself. As you see here, the most important parameter, these are the isolation voltage, which in our case, in our 816 series, 5000 volt, and the power dissipation of the part totally. Here I want to note something. If you see the power dissipation of the LED itself, it's 100 milliwatt, and the power dissipation of the LED and the power dissipation of our phototransistor is 150 milliwatt. But people need to observe that the total power dissipation is not the sum of both of them. The total power dissipation of the part is lower. It means that when you consider the design or the application and operation of your optocoupler, you need to be careful, because the part can also get damaged if it gets too much energy, which cannot be emitted or taken out of the part. Then what we have further in our datasheet is, of course, the output properties. As you can see here, important to notice is that we have the test conditions for the different output properties. Please observe this when you use your optocoupler. In most cases, customer or the application engineer usually don't follow this test condition, because there are different type of circuits, different type of transfer that need to be observed. If there is any need for some other specification, as for example, what we use in our test condition, these are parameters that are given in one of the standards, which I will mention later. But there are also products on the market that specify forward current of 1 milliamp, 2 milliamps, collector emitter voltage of 10 volt, and so on. If you have such questions and you need some more information on this case, please don't hesitate to ask us and to obtain more information. But in most cases, we are able to help you, and we will be glad to discuss with you further. Now, to go on further with the parts, I would like to show you the parameters or the importance of the current transfer ratio. This is like the most important factor or the main parameter of the optocoupler. As you can see, the current transfer ratio depends a lot on the forward current or the light output. When the light emission decreases with time, then the current transfer ratio will also decrease with time. In most cases, we use or optocoupler are used at 1 or 5 up to 10 milliamps. And as you can see on the graph here, at higher current, the efficacy of the LED will drop down, the LED will heat up, and your current transfer ratio will also drop down. In addition to this, your part will start aging a lot faster, and this can lead to earlier failure. So all these temperature parameters and current transfer ratio and the driving current need to be observed. Then what's other important is also the temperature dependency. For higher temperature, we have a decrease of the light intensity or decrease of the efficiency of the LED. We also have a but increase in the gain factor. All these parameters, they interact with each other, but as you can see, we have a very nice region where we have a very constant output. And of course, our optocouplers can be used up to temperature of 100 degrees or 110 degrees. But in this case, a special consideration needs to be taken about the temperature and the cooling down of the product. So the product can maintain its stability and lifetime over a long time and long periods. Now, I spoke a lot about certificates. And here I would like to introduce you or to give you an overview of what certificates we have for the optocoupler. Most important, there are 3 different certificates. One is the VDE or DIN. This is the German Society of Electrotechnics. The certificate is also International European certificate. Name or the number is 60747-5-5. This is the certificate which describes the main reliability parameters that one need to conduct or to test by optocouplers. It also describes the terminology, which names and which tests and which ratings and characteristics need to be measured in an optocoupler. As I said before, our catalog, our database is based mainly on the VDE certificate and what's important to give there. But if you find some information that is not there or you need some additional information, please don't hesitate to ask us. The second certificate that we have is the CQC. This is the Chinese quality certificate, important for products that are sold out, exported to Asia and used in the Asia region or mainly in China. The certificate is straightforward and describes only the quality of the parts. And this certificate number or this certificate we also have available. The third certificate is the UL-1577. It's basically the American standard for optocoupler certification, used mostly in the US and the Americas. It describes what an optocoupler need to do to provide the protection and to have to work without any damage. The certificate basically describes optocoupler signal transfer for circuits up to 600 volt. These are the main certificates that describe the part itself. And in most of these certificates, these are the important parts or the important parameters that we need to observe. These are the external creepage, which is basically the path that the current needs to take to get from one circuit, from one lead to the other lead. So this is defined by the internal housing of the product. The second important parameter is the clearance. Clearance is basically the shortest air distance between the two pads. As you remember, when I introduced to you the mounting options, the different sizes or the different distance between the soldering pads describe, in this case, our clearance. And the third parameter is the insulation thickness. This is an important parameter for the form or for the art of the product. It describes basically the distance between the two circuits inside the product. What's important also to know is there are also a lot of different certificates on the market describing how I use my product in different audio system, medical system, and so on. In this case, it's not also up to the optocoupler to have or to describe the whole system. Then the whole system needs to be taken into account. But in reference to optocoupler, the clearance, the creepage, and insulation thickness are the main parameters that are needed for from the optocoupler part to see if it works into such a standard where a standard describes a complete device and not a single part. But if you have any further questions on this, just don't hesitate, and we are always there to help you. Now, after we introduce the certificate, I would like to go on further and introduce you now how you can get the correct part. If you go on our website and look for the optocouplers, you always find our part number 140, 816, 14, and then some letters, some numbers. These numbers describe the different package, the different CTR, and the packaging type of the product. As I said, we have 5 different package and 5 different binning. So altogether, you have the choice of 25 products that are already available ex stock. And of course, the packaging type for the standard and M type or the through-hole technology, we have the tube packaging. And for the surface mount technology, we have the real packaging. This is like the standard packaging used in machine production or automated production. So now you know exactly how you can choose your optocoupler from our large portfolio. And you can find all of those optocoupler on our homepage in the area of optoelectronics and the product group of Optocoupler. You can just have to click on the WL-OCPT match code, the short name for our optocoupler with phototransistor output. And there you have the list of all the different forms. And as you see, the different mounting forms all have the same size, 6.5 by 4.8, 4.5 millimeter length and width, and 3.5 millimeter height. Then, once you choose which form you have, you also have the option to choose the different binning based on the different test based on the test condition, and additionally you have the maximum current, maximum voltage parameters from our products. In this case, you can directly add samples, free samples in your box and get your free samples for testing. Now, as our time is getting close, I just want to show one last information why we decided to make optocoupler and what is specific in our optocoupler. There are 3 distinct features in our optocoupler. The first one is our coplanar structure, which means that our emitter and detector are on the same plane. What's important? is with the coplanar structure, we have a fixed isolation gap. So the distance between the two circuits is pretty much same and always the 0.4 millimeter. And of course, the other important is we have a high stability of the CTR. Other feature, this is the white housing of our product. White housing means that our optocoupler are white outside. What does this bring is basically the emitter and detector, as you see, are encapsulated in some transparent silicon, and the transparent silicon is then put into the housing. A white housing, in comparison to the black housing, provide a better internal reflection. So the whole signal that is output from the emitter will just go to the detector. This also leads to the higher CTR and better stability of the signal. The third distinct feature is we use copper lead frame. There are also products on the market that use iron lead frame, but copper has a better thermal qualities, better electrical properties, and basically is better for mounting and for the long time reliability of the product. And of course, what I also want to mention here again, all our packages types and all our products and binning, they are available ex stock. So you can order each one of them and test in addition at your application which one is the best product for your application. With this, I would like to end my talk, and now just for a short summary, what we did today is I introduced to you the Optocoupler series 816 from Würth Elektronik, which is available since a few weeks on our website and direct delivery from our warehouse. The Optocoupler Phototransistor main usage is protection from overvoltage and insulation of the systems with different potentials, and simple feedback from one circuit to another. We have altogether 25 products with 5 different mounting types and 5 different current transfer ratio binnings. All the 25 products available ex stock and able to order. And of course, please don't forget, or if you have any more questions about the structure or the why our product and what we put in our product, don't forget and don't hesitate to contact us. Also, for any further questions, you can also contact your local sales representative and they will be able to help you or get in contact also with us for further questions and answers and help. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I will now give the word back to Marcus, and we will try now to help and answer all your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Celio, for your interesting presentation. And as you have mentioned, now we would like to turn our attention to your questions, and we wait a little while until some questions come in. Okay, you can ask us the questions with the chat function in the webinar control panel. Okay, Celio, so let's start. What is the distance between LED and an optocoupler?
Thank you, Marcus. I think this question is most important. What is the, or as I understand it, is what is the distance between the detector, the emitter and the detector, or the LED and the phototransistor in our optocoupler? And as I said, this is, you can count this as the 0.4 millimeter, which is the standard insulation distance in this case.
Okay, so thank you for your explanation. Then we have a look at the next questions. Okay, Celio. Is it possible to use optocouplers for analog signals?
Um, Thank you. Okay. Of course, it's possible to use optocouplers in analog signals. The output of an optocoupler or the phototransistor or the simple optocoupler phototransistor are always analog signals. So in this case, the simple optocoupler phototransistors always give analog signals, analog input and output.
Okay, so next question. Is there a design kit for the optocouplers?
Thank you. At the moment, we don't have any design kits for optocouplers. We have just introduced the parts in our portfolio. So I guess we will just work in this direction. And as long as we have some more information, then we will be able or we will inform you so you can also use some design kits from our side.
Okay, so now we have a look at the next questions and we wait a little. Also, the hint from my side, you will get the link to the presentation as well as to the recording of the webinar in the next few weeks. Okay, Giulio, let's move on with the next question. Is there an optocoupler series 816 with black housing?
Okay, thank you again for this interesting question. On the market, of course, there are optocoupler with black housing. As I mentioned before, our white housing is specially made for our type of optocoupler, so we have a better internal reflection and we have an improved CTR. In this case, the difference between, in my impression, the difference between a black and white housing is only the color of the housing. We are looking also at some optocoupler designs engineering with black housing, but at the moment we are not going to introduce any of those products. But if there is any interest and any desire, we are able to discuss this further and see if there is some real interest in this case and help.
Okay. Then next question. What are the different materials used for fabricate optocouplers?
Okay, I guess this question also relates to the question before, as this white and black material is one of the two different materials used for the fabrication of optocoupler. This is basically the outside housing of the product. What other difference in the materials used is basically the lead frame or the part that is carrying together everything. And as I said, as I mentioned in my talk at the end, what we use is a copper lead frame, which has a better electrical properties and better thermal properties compared to the standard or the low grade iron lead frames. So these are the different materials. One is the housing, the outside housing, or the epoxy molding, black or white. And the second difference, of course, is the lead frame. If we use iron or copper lead frame, and the rest of the different materials, of course, are the emitter and detector, but these materials, unfortunately, are confidential part from our recipe to make the best optocoupler, so I cannot share much information on this case.
Okay, so thank you for your explanation. Then as we have a look at the next questions, just a hint from my side, if we can't answer your question within the live webinar now, we will answer it after the webinar via email. Okay, I see the next question. So, JDO, how is WE different or Würth Elektronik different from the competitor in bringing this part?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think the interesting here, or as I understand, is the binning of the CTR. I might explain. The binning of our parts is basically the standard binning available on the market. So all our competitors use the same binning steps and binning sizes, and of course the difference in most cases is our service and that we have all the different bins and all the different sizes ex stock, so everybody can order free samples and try to see which binning is the best one for him.
Okay. So then let's move to the next question. Is this series, the 816 series, first of many series like Serie or other?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And yes, our 816 series is the first optocoupler that we introduced on the market, but we wanted to start with some one series and work out, because it's a lot of workload to obtain all the certificates, to make the best recipe, to make the best optocoupler product, and to offer the best quality to the customers. That's why we started with one simple series and offer 25 products of it. But we are also working on the next stages and to the next parts. So at the moment, I cannot show you the exact roadmap, or I cannot tell you the exact roadmap of the different parts that we are going to bring out. But if there are any concrete inquiries, we are open to discuss this and see if we can help the customer with further parts or further products.
Okay. So I think then we have time for one more question. And I see it here. Celio, is there a minimum order quantity for optocouplers?
Okay, thanks for the question. I guess these questions come from a customer that is not familiar with our customer service and how we like to work with our customers. In Würth Elektronik, we don't offer any minimum order quantities for our standard products. Products that are ex-stock can be ordered in 1, in 5, or in 100 pieces, or in 10,000 pieces. So there is no minimum order quantity, and there is also free samples for cases when somebody needs to experiment.
Okay, so now we are finished with our webinar. If there are any questions left, we will answer them via email afterwards. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed our webinar. Also, many thanks to you, Celio, for this great webinar.
Thank you, and I wish everybody have a nice evening, and see you next time.
Yeah. Goodbye.